Upadesh was a book which was compiled by the Gaudiya Math, which are various stories spoken by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur during his manifest pastimes. And these stories were compiled in a book, I think, during Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's manifest presence. And it was originally written in Bengali and has been translated into English. Many of these stories you've probably have heard some of them before from Srila Prabhupada, and there's some of them which you may have not heard before. But they're kind of like fables or fictional stories. But within the story itself, there's very deep, intricate meanings which are very instructive for our devotional life. The first story that I'll be speaking about is the story of the geometry teacher. Once there was a mother who had a son that she was raising on her own, and she was very concerned to see that he got an education. So she hired a geometry teacher. She hired a teacher to begin teaching the boy with, basic reading, writing, and learning, English, science, math, like that. So initially the teacher was teaching the ABCs like any student would, like any teacher would, and the student was making progress. So when the student came to the 7th standard, the teacher began to teach the student algebra. And the teacher said, now apply ABC to this triangle. And the mother overheard the teacher speaking like this, and she came in and she said, I've been paying you 10 rupees a month for all these years, and now my child is supposed to be at the 10th standard, and you're still teaching him ABCs. What kind of teacher are you? You're completely useless. Your services are no longer needed here. Please get out. The teacher, it was such a forceful response that the mother gave that the teacher was forced to leave. What is the lesson that we get from this particular story? The lesson that we get from this story is that many times as people are looking for a spiritual path, there are many different routes which one can take, many different paths which one can take. And generally people start to walk a spiritual path due to frustration with material life. This is the general reason why people come. Chaturvidha bhajante mam janasu kritina arjuna artha tajignasu shreyas uttamam. Sorry, I'm messing up that verse from Bhagavad Gita. But Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that there's 4 pious people who come to the path of spiritual life. And of those 4 pious people who come to the path of spiritual life, there are those who are seeking wealth. There are those who are seeking knowledge. There's those who are trying to escape material suffering. And there are those who are, someone remind me what the 4th one is. It's escaping me. Seeking wealth, seeking money, seeking knowledge, and those who are seeking wealth, seeking knowledge, those who are distressed, and those who are inquisitive. Those who are inquisitive. Jignasya. They're inquisitive to know the absolute truth. So those who come to the path on the basis of distress, or any of the following people, they're given a variety of options in the different spiritual paths which they can take up. There's the path of jnana, there's the path of yoga, there's the path of bhakti. And as the Chaitanya Charitamrita explains, Krishna Bhakta Nishkam Atayeva Shanta, Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami, Yatayeva Shanta. That of all those who are walking the path of transcendence, only the bhakta is able to be shanta, peaceful. And that's because there's no sense of dependence on one's own ability in order to make progress on the path of spiritual realization. Whereas the jnani and the yogi, they're very much dependent on their own devices in order to make progress. And inattention on their path can bring innumerable obstacles in their progress. Yad pada pankaja palasa vilasa bhaktam karmashrayam ugrantitam ugrayanti shantam tadvanna rikta matayo yatayo pirutas shotoga nastararanam bhajan vasudeva. That those who are walking the path of bhakti, those who have developed attachment for the vilas, pada pankaja vilasa bhaktya, those who have tasted the sweet nectarian bliss which comes from selflessly serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pada pankaja vilasa bhaktam karmashrayam ugrantitam ugrayanti shantam. For them, although there may be various samskars from their previous material conditioning which may torture their consciousness from time to time, ultimately they're able to be peaceful because the vilas, the sweetness which they're experiencing from serving the Supreme Personality of God, it is so overwhelming that although rivers of material desires may flow into their consciousness, the ocean of devotional service, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, overcomes the force of those material desires. Tadvanda rikta matayo yatayo pirutas. Whereas those who are jnanis, yogis, karmis, although they may by their own force keep back the waves of material sense gratification, they're unable to stop those waves. The force of that river overcomes them, and shotoga nastararanam bhajan vasudeva. So it's recommended that everyone engage in the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for this purpose, because unless one has a personal conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then ultimately one can be thrown off the path. As Narada Muni says, Naiskarmyamapi achyuta bhava varjitam nashobhate jnanam alam niranjanam utapuna shashvara bhadramishvare utapuna shashvara bhadramishvare ishvare it karma yadash Naishkarmyamapi achyuta bhava varjitam nashobhate jnanam alam niranjanam kutapura shashvara bhadramishvare yadatpitam karma yadat. You know the last line, Konta Karnava?
I just searched it too. I don't remember this, but na charpitam karma yadapyata.
What is it?
Na charpitam karma yadapyata.
Charpitam karma yadat. What is it?
Na charpitam karma yad api akaranam. Yeah. Na charpitam karma yadapi akaranam. 1517. No, 1512. Sorry.
1512. Nacharpitam karma yadapi karanam. Sorry. Nacharpitam karma yadapi karanam. That naishkarmyamapi achyuta bhava varjitam. That even if one is engaging in a process of spiritual realization which is devoid of material affinity, naishkarmyamapi achyuta bhava varjitam ashobhate jnanam alam niranjanam kutapuna shashvara bhadramishvare nacharpitam karma nirapi karanam. That ultimately those paths, although they may be free of a material affinity, if they don't point to a conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a personal conception of Krishna, then that won't fully satisfy the heart of the living entity. And it's actually a disturbance in society. It doesn't look very well, that type of path. And Krishna also explains Kleshas aridikas tesham avyakta shakta chetasam avyakta here dakir dukam, that the path of the impersonal Brahman conception is full of kleshas. So it's very disturbing for the mind of the living entity because it lacks that personal conception. So jnanis, yogis, and various other Mayavadis and personalists, they may take up the path of spiritual realization for the purpose of realizing this Brahman conception or realizing themselves as God. And in the meantime, for the purpose of achieving their respective aim, they may also choose to take up the path of bhakti as a means to their end. But as we know, the path of bhakti is kriti sadhya bhavat sadhya bhavasa sadanabhita nityasiddha sabhavasya prakritam hridya sadhyata. That the path of bhakti is such that it's meant to engage the mind and the senses in activities of devotion to produce bhava in relationship to experiencing those activities. That the activities of themselves, bhakti, bhakta, and bhagavan, are ultimately eternal. And it's not that bhakti can be removed from the process once one attains perfection. So there's three types of bhakti. There's sadhana bhakti, there's bhava bhakti, and there's prema bhakti. But you'll see that those who have achieved the platform of prema bhakti, they continue on with the primary activities of devotional service. Tahan vishtarit pali prema pal, yahan secha nitya, yahan mali secha nitya, shravanari jal. That even though they're existing in this world, they water the root of love of Godhead, and that root sticks to Krishna's lotus feet. And so they water the creeper of love and devotion, although existing in this world. So they stay connected to the activities of devotion, despite the fact they've become quite proficient in the various emotions and complexities of which exist on the path of devotion. That the rasa vichar, the rasa tattva, becomes a reality for them, and it's not just a means to the end, but rather the means and the end are the same. So how does all of this relate to the story that the mother is compared to an impersonalist, and she gets her son enrolled in a particular class in order for him to make progress on the path of education? So he's learning ABCs, but then as he makes further progress, he has to learn how to apply those ABCs to algebra. So the use of ABCs becomes expanded. So in the same way, the path of devotion, although we may be doing the ABCs of basic sadhana bhakti now, those activities, when performed on a higher standard of consciousness, to nama rupa charitasa sukirtananu smridyor kramena rasanam anasini yoja tistan brajetananuragi jananugami kalam narya akilamitu padesha sadham. That as one makes progress on the path of devotion, their practice of sadhana bhakti becomes infused with an intense greediness to serve the Lord in a particular way. So it becomes more expanded, and as one becomes elevated to the path of bhava, Sudasatva Visheshatmam Prema Suryam Susamyabhak Ruchi Vischinmayashranya Krita So Bhava Uchate, that one's heart becomes moved by various emotions and experiences in direct contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead on the level of bhava. And then one moves into the level of prema, and one's directly associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So those ABCs, which were the basic functions of devotion, they become the same activities which one performs on a higher level of devotion, chanting the holy names, serving the deity. All these things become tools by which one has trained themselves for the ultimate stage of perfection. Whereas the Mayavadis and impersonalists, although they appear to be engaging in devotion, they may appear to be worshiping the deity, at the stage of perfection, they ultimately give up they ultimately give up those practices because of a false conception. And what happens is yene ravindaksha vimuktamaninas my yayat yene ravindaksha vimuktamaninas swayasha baba avashuddha buddhaya aruda krinshena parampadam tata ashantado najata yusma angriha. That although they conceive themselves to have come to the perfect stage, they come down from that stage eventually again. Just as a boy who is studying ABCs, if he doesn't learn how to apply the ABCs in advanced algebra, then his education becomes stifled. So, in the same way, if one accepts the activities of devotion but does not develop an attachment or a conception of the personality of Godhead, Krishna, then those activities will be rendered useless because they didn't produce the ultimate result of the activities themselves. So impersonalists have a use and throw method in relationship devotion, just like the mother, that you're teaching my son ABCs even at the stage of algebra. So they feel that the path of devotion, the activities of devotion, they can ultimately be given up one day, so one can move on to higher things, without understanding that as one makes advancement on the path of devotion, one learns how to utilize the basic alphabet for various complex sentences in order to write beautiful poetry or apply it in ways which seem a bit esoteric and inconceivable to a neophyte. So in this way, we learn many, many lessons from this story, which was illuminated by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And we learn how the path of devotion is not only the means, but it is also the end of our practice of devotion. So it's 7:35, and I think we try to end at 8. So I wanted to leave some time for us to discuss. Generally, these classes might be a little bit short sometimes because the stories are short and the principles are quite simple. They're meant to be utilized in classes. So I'll do my best to expand on them. But sometimes the classes may be shorter, so it'll be helpful for all of us if there's good discussion at the end of the classes. So probably in this particular series, we'll have more time for interaction rather than just a monologue.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the nice story. I could not understand the meaning, but now it's very clear as you related that a mother is compared to a Mayavadi or a person who is indirectly approaching Krishna through not for the purpose of pure devotional service. So although the teacher is teaching the same ABC, but it's a mature lesson of the same ABC. In the beginning, it is just to learn the alphabet, but as they grow, they are able to apply it on geometry. So similarly, in our devotional service, we are chanting in the beginning, and big neophyte devotees are chanting, and practicing devotees are chanting, advanced devotees are chanting. But there is a difference in terms of the application. They can feel more. The advanced devotees can apply the same chanting in a deeper sense, you know, as we understand the stages of devotional service. So,
Right.
although somebody might say, "Oh, what is the difference?" In ISKCON, the first devotee who is coming, he's also chanting, and the devotee who is sannyasi is also chanting. But there's a difference between.
Yeah, there's a difference in the depth and the experience and the purity of the chanting.
I mean, so your process doesn't work. Neophyte devotees are also chanting, sannyasis are also chanting. What is the difference?
Yeah, what's going on here?
Yeah, you should just maybe study Shastra, maybe give elaborate classes. In the beginning you might just chant because that's a simple process. Some impersonalists might say, as Prakashanand Saraswati was saying, for a sannyasi, you should not dance. You should just sit down and study Vedanta. What is the use of chanting in a sentimental way? He was
Yeah, there's a story about Akinshana Krishnadas Babaji at the time of his initiation. he was due to get second initiation, and at that time in the Gaudiya month, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati generally wouldn't award a name until this time of second initiation. He would initiate people with first Harinam Diksha, but he wouldn't offer a name until second initiation. So Akinshadas Krishnadas Babaji was due to get initiated, and his name was on the list, and a name had already been chosen for him. But somehow his name didn't get called for second initiation. There was like a list, and his name was, for whatever reason, it didn't get posted, despite the fact they had chosen a name and he was supposed to be on the list. So it seemed as if he wasn't going to get second initiation. And then he said, "That's fine. I should learn to be satisfied with my own qualification." And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati heard him say this, and he called him in, and he offered the name Swadhikananda, which is that one who relishes their own qualification, was the name which he offered to him. So, at the initial stages, one may be only chanting the name and they feel, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. But actually, if one can just learn to be satisfied with their prescribed duty of chanting Hare Krishna, they can make so much advancement rather than thinking, it's an achievement of some type of external adjustment or maladjustment which determines one's advancement. One could think that I need to become a temple president. One could think I need to become a sannyasi. One could think I need to become a GVC, and this will mean that I'm advanced. But actually, advancement means how much depth do we have in our chanting of Hare Krishna. It's not determined by any type of external achievement. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati noted this in Akinshadas Krishnadas Babaji. So even the seemingly most neophyte people or most insignificant people in the association of devotees, they're advanced on the basis of how much attachment they have for chanting the holy name.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisances as always.
Oh, Satya Sankalpa Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So nice to hear from you after a long time. It was very nourishing, Prabhu.
Are you in India?
No, Prabhu, I'm back. I'm back here in IC.
Okay.
So, Prabhuji, I had a question. So, yeah, I think you mentioned the point about doing a sadhana bhakti and doing it properly with the right consciousness, which will lead to more depth as we keep practicing. And I was thinking of the verse, I think in second chapter, first canto, Dharma Swanasitapam Sam Vishwamsena Katha Soya, Notpada
Viratim Shama Eva Hi Kevalam.
So, Prabhuji, like from that perspective, it like in my understanding, it looks like one should not take up any activities any activities which doesn't lead to rati or like attraction towards Krishna is useless. So it more looks like an active choice of what we can do so that attraction is awakened. But from the perspective or example you mentioned, it looked like that is that is not something in our control. We can just control doing our ABCs, our sadhana, and that can come late. Like that can be that attraction can come into our heart out of grace of Krishna. So, like, how do I reconcile that?
So basically, you're asking that one's duty should be aligned so they can. I'm not quite understanding your question. Could you ask it in a more concise way?
Yes. So, like the example that you gave, in what I understood of it was that one should do the sadhana bhakti, and the attraction towards Krishna will awaken eventually in due course of time, but out of grace of Krishna. It's not something that we can create out of our own will, right? As in, it's not something that is like do this and you will achieve it. Like do ABC and you will achieve it. It's not for sure, right? Like it will come, but out of grace of Krishna.
No, that's. I think I understand what you're saying. These two things are two different things that we're dealing with. Dharma swanasti tampum sam vikshakshena katasya napada yat yatiratim shrama evahi kevalam. This is dealing with If someone performs, various obligations which they have in this world, but a taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna doesn't arise in the midst of those activities, they need to reevaluate their activities. For instance, a jnani or karmi, they may be engaging in so-called activities which could seem like bhakti, but if those activities aren't sanctioned by the parampara, Mahat Kripa Kona Bina Karme Bhakti Nai, Krishna Bhakti Duri Raho Samsara Nahasyai. That if your activities of bhakti are not blessed, have not received the sanction of a Mahat, then even if one appears to be engaging in bhakti, that bhakti won't produce love for Krishna. And not only will it not produce love for Krishna, it won't even bring one out of material existence. Like you see, some Mayavadis, they'll read Srimad Bhagavatam or they'll chant the holy names, but actually they're just crippling their progress more and more by doing those activities due to their offenses to the Lord. So the point that's being made in this story is that the activities of sadhana bhakti are just as the activities of sadhana bhakti are applicable for a neophyte as they are for an advanced devotee. And an advanced devotee, for the sake of doing something more, doesn't give up those activities. Ultimately, our conscientious and attentive application of the process of devotional service is extremely necessary for us to make advancement. It's not just based on Krishna's mercy. If one is neglecting the principle of niyamagraha mentioned by Srila Rupa Goswami, then the ultimate fruit of devotional service will not develop in one's heart. So one has to be attentive to their practice. And attention to that practice means to clearly understand what our goal is and what are the activities which take place on the level of that goal. Like for instance, some people in the name of practicing Raganuga Bhakti, they stop going to Mangalartik, they stop shaving their face, they don't wash their clothes. But actually, it's explained by Rupa Goswami that if someone is practicing Raganuga Bhakti, they're even more attentive to those things than they were previously to make sure that no one catches on to the fact that they're experiencing some type of higher level of realization. So attention on the path of devotion is always necessary, and Krishna's mercy is never an excuse for being inattentive to one's practices. And simultaneously, the practices of devotion, they're just as necessary for us in the neophyte stage as they are in the level of perfection. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Prabhu, it does. Yes. Thank you so much.
Adinath Krishna Prabhu, I think you were going to say something. I saw your microphone turn off. Satya Sankalpa Prabhu spoke.
Hare Krishna, Devavratha Prabhu. Please accept
Hare
my humble
Krishna.
obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for the discourse and this story. What I'm taking away from it present moment is that if we are picking a path of spiritual life and ultimately it's devoid of the conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then Shama Eva Hi Kevalam, like Satya Sankalpa Prabhu quoted here, and also Kaitava Dharma, it's actually cheating religion, because Prabhupada gives a very basic example or definition, I should say, of what true Dharma is. He says to know God and to love Him. So to know God means to know the person behind everything. Aham, mam, everything is saying I, not tat or that. It's me, Krishna is saying. And therefore, satatam kirtayanto mam, just glorify Him. It's a very, very simple process, actually. And it's natural. We see it regularly, even in the material world. The propensity or inclination to want to glorify someone on a local level or on a global level, it's there. And therefore, it's simply a matter of redirecting that. And in due course of time, Cheto Darbana Marjanam, all these so-called important things that we base our value system on, due to Jayato Vishayan Pumsam, the person contemplates these things and therefore builds value around it based on their priorities. And one of the beautiful things about the Krishna consciousness movement is that the more one practices, as you were quoting Devavratha Prabhu, there's more depth to one's practice. It's a subtle form of intensity that actually develops in the form of a sentiment. And so long we're consistent, the process is bona fide, like you were saying, coming from parampara, and we follow it, we'll achieve the ultimate goal. That's my takeaway from thus far. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, another point that I was thinking of when you were saying that, it's very important for us to become extremely clear in the various tattvas of Krishna consciousness. Krishna tattva, bhakti tattva, prema tattva art, lila tattva, rasa tattva, bhava tattva sar. Kaviraj Goswami says that this is the definition of Krishna consciousness, to have an awareness of these different tattvas. So to know Krishna in truth, Krishna explains is how one comes to him. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tattvata. That one has to understand Krishna in tattva. And understanding Krishna in tattva means not being lazy in understanding the different dimensions of sambandha gyan, abhideya, and prayojan. We have to have very clear, systematic knowledge of our relationship with Krishna, process for renovating that relationship or rejuvenating that relationship, and the ultimate goal of having rejuvenated that relationship. We need to be very clear in these different dimensions of knowledge, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he explains that if one goes on practicing devotional service and they consider anarthana vritti to be the ultimate goal, then that can lead to impersonalism. So artha pravritti means we're developing a conception of Krishna. And we utilize the activities of devotion in order to express our love for Krishna, in order to serve Krishna as a person. So we can't just organize our entire life around purifying our heart. That needs to be there. We need to be very sincere in our purification of heart. But the fruit of that purification of heart is meant to produce an artha pravritti, which is an appreciation for Krishna as a person, an attachment to Krishna as a person. And that comes through having scientific, systematic wisdom of sambandha, relationship, abhideya, process, and prayojan, the ultimate goal of life.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Anyone else? 8 minutes.
Nice to see you, Devavratha Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Please accept my obeisances.
Thanks for taking time for the group and holding this class today. I just had just a more mundane kind of reflection on the story. Is that the part that's funny about it is that you were talking about how the mother had heard the teacher again bringing up the ABCs, and ABC is just like the basic of like a language or whatever. But actually, like if you've heard of the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's actually pretty deep and pretty huge, and not something that somebody's going to come up with until like they've reflected on mathematics like a whole lot. There's record of that theorem like a number of different places in history, but it's very important and it's very useful, and it's referred to, and it's very foundational in mathematics, but it's not as simple as it sounds. So that was just a kind of my reflection on that one, kind of a mundane level of that story.
Yeah, it may seem really simple, this application of a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But as you're saying, it requires not only knowledge of applying ABCs, but it requires some knowledge in mathematics. So it indicates that if one's applying ABCs, they've become very proficient in all areas of knowledge. So Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojata. Jnanadasya Shivairagyam Gyadacham Yadahoitukam. That if one just puts all their attention on bhakti, on developing devotion for Krishna, the natural byproduct of that will be is they will make sufficient progress in the fields of renunciation and knowledge of the different categories of this world. So I like how you expanded the point. It's very, very helpful. It helps us go deeper into the analogy in this. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Who is that? Vishal?
Yes, Prabhu.
Oh, Hare Krishna, Vishal.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Oh, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Prabhu, I really like how you reiterated the point when Prabhupada says bhakti is simple for the simple and complex for the crooked.
Yeah.
Yes, Prabhu. I had one question, Prabhu. You mentioned that the path is not just a means to the end, but it is also the goal.
Mm.
And there are two observations we have made. So you have mentioned multiple times that we must exert ourselves to our fullest in the service of Krishna, and we will make progress that way. But we also see many devotees towards the end of their life, they tend to go towards one of the dhams and spend most of their last few years deepening their own sadhana. So how do we see both of these as different paths, as means to the same end, and what could we aim for? Do we give ourselves completely, serve all day, or deepen our sadhana by ourselves going deeper into shastras alone? So how do we see that?
I think the important thing is to be balanced. Yuktahara viharascha, yuktahara viharascha. Actually, I've never memorized the shloka, so I'm not going to try it. But one should be balanced in their practice of devotional service. We shouldn't simply renounce this world and go live in a cave, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, dustamana. If one just immaturely goes and tries to perform nam bhajan in seclusion, the fruit will be they'll just simply be meditating on the opposite sex and desires for wealth. So it's not recommended that we just go off without purifying our consciousness into such condition. And simultaneously, Srila Prabhupada emphasized that devotees, because of their lack of qualification to chant 64 rounds a day, encourage them to extend their hands and senses in the service of the Lord. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatpratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchate. That by engaging the senses in the service of Krishna, that purifies the heart of all upadis. So upadis means material bodily designations. And that identity which we've developed around those upadis is the impetus for various material desires on the basis of that identity that we developed. So pure devotional service can purify the heart of all unwanted things within the heart. So Srila Jagannath Das Babaji, which yesterday was his disappearance day, he was known for people coming and wanting to join his ashrama, and he would engage them in the garden rather than engage them in nam bhajan, because he saw that they weren't qualified, so we engaged them in practical service. Simultaneously, along with engaging in various services with our mind and senses, we also have to make it a point to give ourselves completely to the process of chanting and hearing. Yata yata ma parimrijjate so punyagata shravanabhidanai tatata pashanti vashta shukshman jakshuryata vajana samprayuktam. To the degree one surrenders to this process of hearing and chanting, to that degree Krishna reveals himself, just as one applies a medicinal ointment to the eye and one gradually develops, regains the ability to see through that medicinal ointment. In the same way, to the degree we apply ourselves in the process of hearing and chanting, to that degree we develop a deeper appreciation and realization of Krishna. Jnanam paramaguyam me tad vijnanam samanvita sarahasya tarangam sha grihitam gutitam maya. That this process of devotional service is very confidential and it can bring about realization within the heart, so very carefully apply it. So we have to apply the process of devotional service in totality, the way it was prescribed by the previous acharyas. And by following in the footsteps of the mood and method of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, we can be guaranteed success. And if one spends a life absorbed in that lifestyle of doing service, hearing and chanting, associating with devotees, and hearing from realized souls, then as one makes progress through their life, the natural byproduct will be their developing a sense of attachment for Krishna. Krishna charani hoy jari anurag, Krishna binu ayantra tara nahi rahe rag. That attachment for Krishna will be the natural uprising within the heart. Bhakti upadyate pumsam. And the simultaneous result will be that one loses attraction for trying to exploit this material world. So if one wants to go to the Dham at the end of their life, it's encouraged because that's the most ideal place to leave their body. And simultaneously, in the midst of doing a lifetime of service, one should also be making it a point to have regular contact with the Dham. But we shouldn't prematurely renounce our position without sufficient internal purity. We should sway adhikarya nishtas, that we should function according to our adhikar. And Srila Prabhupada has given a program of Krishna consciousness which allows people from all sorts of walks of life to make systematic progress through the careful application of the process. So one has to make it a point to engage in that process with attention and be thoughtful about it. And if there comes a point in one's life in which one is in an older age and is getting prepared to potentially leave, then going to the Dham could be authorized, provided they're doing it under thoughtful guidance. And that's the main point, is that the process of devotional service is Bejare Munayotagre Dharman Bhagavatan Iha Satam Vishutam Shemayam Kalpante Yenutaniha. That the process of Dharma has to be understood through following in the footsteps of those who have walked that path previously. Otherwise, it can be very difficult to understand what Dharma is and what we're supposed to do in such circumstances. So if we can remain under the shelter of those who are advanced in devotional service and follow their expert guidance, then we'll most definitely make rapid advancement, being under their care and protection. The main principle is we should not act whimsically, we should act under good guidance and direction in such circumstances. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Prabhu. That was just amazing. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. It's 8:02, Konta Karnava. I did my best to finish on time.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you very much. I mean, we right now, so we have changed the format little bit, Prabhu. We are Bhagavatam speak. I mean, you can speak up to 8. We can do 10 questions after that also. 8, to 10 minutes. But it is good that we had discussion today. So many devotees had reflections and questions. So I like this also.
Likely we'll be doing a lot of reflections on this because some of the stories are quite short and the principles of them are pretty basic and easy to understand, so it won't require so much output. But the more we can have it be discussion based, the deeper we can go into it.
Okay. Yeah, this is nice. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to be back. And I wish you all success in your day practicing Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. SBSST Devavratha Prabhu ki
Jai.
Jai. Hari Bol.